All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the City of Larkspur, Town of Corte Madera Shared Fire Services Ad Hoc Committee meeting of Monday, June 5th, 2017. First of all, we have welcome and introductions, and unless any of the managers have any specific welcome messages they'd like to share, maybe we could just go around and introduce ourselves.
Sure.
I'll start. I'm Diane First, Mayor of Corte Madera.
Catherine Way on the Larkspur City Council.
Larry Chu, Larkspur City Council.
Todd Cusimano, Town Manager of Corte Madera.
Dan Schwartz, Larkspur City Manager.
Scott Schertz, Fire Chief for Larkspur and Corte Madera. Nick Gabbard, Corte Madera. Nick Gabbard, Corte Madera, Captain, Fire Department.
You guys will all, thank you. You'll need to pass the mic. Sorry.
That is awesome.
Tom Timmer, Captain, Larkspur Fire Department.
Okay, thank you. And I see some others of our firefighters and one very well-respected member of the community. Thank you for showing up. All right, unless the managers or the chief or anybody has any other introductory messages, we'll move on to open time for public expression. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on anything not on the agenda tonight? Would you mind maybe just grabbing the microphone that these guys are, thank you.
Jim Robinson, 25. Sorry.
Is this being recorded?
Yeah.
Videoed? Does
Videos.
he have to be over there for that video?
Where would you like me to stand?
Well,
Wherever you want.
podiums.
I don't know.
Short
where it
enough you
works
can
in
see
here.
me here. Jim Robinson, 25 Ash Avenue, Corte Madera. And maybe this is an item that really should be discussed under item number 2, but I have questions about how the areas of Christmas Tree Hill, Chapman Park, and Madera Gardens are currently being served, and how they will be served once your consolidation plan is completed. But it might be an item for discussion under fire stations under number 4, so I defer my comments or discussion till then, if that's okay, if you allow open time at that part of the agenda.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, let's move on to manager's update. So I am happy to just turn it over to you for each of these items, but if there are any for which you would like us to give some feedback or whatever, just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay?
So I have the first one, which is LAFCO, which can be rather quick. You'll recall that Senate Bill 239 passed last year and affects consolidations of our type, where we're forming a joint powers authority, and said they had to go through LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, for review and approval. LAFCO was going through a process to create policies around this new law, and I'm pleased to say they accepted our suggestions that they craft some exemptions so that when you have a new JPA forming, you have both cities behind it, you have both labor groups behind it, that it's not necessary to go through the entire LAFCO process. You'd be spending a lot of taxpayer money on a second review of something that's already being scrutinized rather thoroughly. And I'm pleased to say they've taken up our proposal, and it is going before the commission on Thursday to be adopted, and incorporates all of our suggestions. So if adopted, we will then turn in an application to LAFCO, and their staff will have the authority to administratively exempt it from the full process.
Great.
So we'll save a lot of time and money there.
Great.
And we're told it's going to pass.
Yes.
So.
Good job.
But we don't count our chickens till they're hatched.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Any comments or questions?
And if it passes, let's presume it passes on Thursday, then it would become effective time frame for
I think
that?
immediately.
Immediately?
Yeah, because it's a Marin LAFCO policy.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Cal? That's all right. Thank you. Sloan Bailey, council member of Corte Madera. There's-
Okay, so for item 3B, CalPERS, on this item, I would actually I'd like to give you the ad hoc committee an update of where we are with CalPERS, how we got here and what we're working on, and actually open up a conversation. And really to ask, and please, this conversation is to really vet what we're talking about, the pros and cons of this, and ask for a recommendation as we leave this item in this meeting, because I think this is our next major obstacle, as we've been talking about in recent months. And we really need a recommendation and some direction. And so with that, and Dan is going to jump in here as well. Some background, as you may recall, months ago when we talked about this, we knew CalPERS, and most importantly, it was going to be a major discussion point. When the 2013 law passed, basically the obstacle that was formed for us was that all new agencies formed moving forward with CalPERS, all those new employees would be, originally we thought PEPRA. The good news is we received about 5 months ago that you could also carry over your current classic employee application. So whatever you are under CalPERS on, if you're on the 3 at 55 formula or 3 at 50, you can continue with the new organization and keep your classic designation. The problem with us is it turns out we are probably, in our situation, the first to go through the CalPERS evaluation process in the state of California. So we are similar to some of the agencies in the East Bay, as we talked about in the past, which is good. CalPERS, we have the right contacts within CalPERS who have been trying to problem solve this for us. I believe, when did we last talk about this? Probably over the last 2 or 3 months. They gave us the application to fill out as a new entity, and then to begin a 3 to 6 month evaluation and process with CalPERS to give us an answer on what we can and can't do moving forward with the JPA. Verbally, and based on conversations we've had with them and the intent of the legislation, we believe we'll be able to do what we want to do. But again, it's to fill out the application. Well, when you open the application, there's questions like, what is the name of your JPA? When was it formed? Who is the body that oversees the JPA, the governing body, and so on. So over the past month, we have been talking with CalPERS on how to fill out the application. And we're here today with the same answer. How do we fill out the application? And the good news is CalPERS is trying to assist us. The bad news is they don't know what to do with us. So it began a series of conversations that the management committee has had briefly with our labor attorney, that's Glenn Berkheimer, and with our legal counsel representative, that's Tom Bertrand, and really to talk out what are our options at this point? Because we believe we can do what we want to do, but we have to start this process. And keep in mind, when you complete that application, it is CalPERS, and so you have to anticipate that it could take 6 months. When we did this and we started talking about going down the road of sharing services and evaluating a consolidation, we talked about how important it was to move as quickly as possible to a decision point. Because when you share services operationally for an extended period of time, it starts to cause problems. And here we are now going a year out, and it looks like it's going to be extended more. So one of the scenarios that we talked about, and again, we wanted the labor analysis, to the political analysis, to the management analysis, to the labor group analysis, to the legal analysis. We looked at every pillar of this. And basically what we're thinking about, what we want to talk to you about tonight and get your direction, is to consider forming the JPA in advance. Put it in place in advance, and basically what it would look like, and Dan, happy to jump in at any point, but basically what we would do is we'd form the JPA in advance. All the employees would continue to be Corte Madera employees and Larkspur employees. We would share our employees with the JPA. And basically within the governance of the JPA and how we word that JPA with the help of Tom Bertrand, it speaks and answers to all the issues we have right now of a Larkspur employee overseeing a Corte Madera employee. It solves all those human resources issues that we have right now. And then it allows us to continue forward, fill out the application, start the 3 to 6 month evaluation, and go through this process with CalPERS. It gets us there. The good news for us is it doesn't change anything for us. We are not, our employees are staying our employees. We are keeping control of the employees. We're just building the model of the governance and the structure of the JPA in advance. The good news also with this is it is currently in and it's the next bullet point, but our 17-18 budgets reflect our current allotment of personnel and how we are sharing, and we'll talk about that later here. So there are no negative impacts to the budget, but it would be forming the governance in advance. And Dan, or if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'll maybe try to capture it in a slightly different language. I think what we've run into is PERS has a process for a new agency to apply to have PERS as a benefit for its employees. We went to them and said, well, we would like confirmation that you will do the benefit the way we want before we form the agency. And although that has happened elsewhere in the state in the past, there's not a prescribed bureaucratic system for doing that. And so I think we've just been running into shockwaves in PERS because we're asking for a process that they don't actually have on the books. So what they've said is you might want, and this stimulated this conversation, you might want to form your JPA, and then you would fit more nicely into our existing process, which would be to ask to be a PERS agency and we also want to ask to be allowed to have a classic formula available, which is a key component of this. So it's really, I think, initially this was, wow, we could solve this problem by dealing with PERS, and then what Todd alluded to in the second part of his presentation is we're starting to realize this may prove more expeditious to move things along here locally because because we've already budgeted in preparation for combining, we think we can manage this in a way administratively where we can start to capture all the efficiencies that we want to capture by being combined.
Can I ask, through the mayor, does CalPERS require a complete application before they'll start an evaluation? Is it possible to have an incomplete application?
So it's taken them 2 months to answer that question. and there's a team of 4. It's every level. There's 4 levels of CalPERS that have to evaluate this process, and all 4 of them are trying to put their heads together. You know, CalPERS, if it's not in writing, it's
I think that
difficult.
speaks to the problem.
Yeah.
Is we ask them a question and they go, well, that's not a normal situation, so we'll get back to you.
Right.
Right? Whereas if we could become an agency, I think the staff we're dealing with won't necessarily have to every time say, we'll call you in a few weeks after we run it by 3 or 4 people. Because at least then they've got a bunch of check boxes in their system and they know what to do. And I'm not trying to run down the CalPERS staff. I get it. They're just processing a lot of stuff.
that's right.
And for them to have something that's not fitting a system is difficult.
And is there precedent of another 2 agencies merging or combining in California that have done this similar pattern? I don't know, so that we have precedent that they actually.
So talking to Glenn Berkheimer about this, and it's one of the things that we've talked about all the way through this process. One option, and some agencies do this, they form the JPA, and then all the new hires moving forward become members of the JPA. In this case, they'd be Pepper employees, but the agencies keep their, under their current MOUs, the unfunded responsibilities and so forth, they keep them under their city and town. It's under their responsibility, and so until they come completely off the books with retirements over the course of a decade or longer. And so that's always been a conversation for us as we've talked about things. It just causes problems having different people receiving different benefits. Structurally, in talking to Tom Bertrand and Glenn Berkheimer is like, okay, what are the pros and cons of this? Like structurally, how does this work? And so one of the things we talked about was taking, and this is where we're at, and we're probably about 90% there, is let's spend our time and really take that MOU, that transition MOU we've been working on, and for the time being, make sure that both Corte Madera and Larkspur MOUs, aside from the 3 at 50 and 3 at 55 formula, match each other. And then we approve those, and then we move forward. And so the worst case scenario is, let's say we can't do what we want to do. What does that look like then? Well, we're still in the same boat we are today. For Corte Madera, we can't, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to move from 3 at 55, and reform our retirement. For Larkspur, the issue would be, do we stay consolidated, with the JPA, or do we change our MOU back to what it was? And so those are our worst case types of scenarios when we talked about it. But again, this is a conversation that's new, and it's for us all to hear and kind of wrap our heads around it and ask those questions. But, You know, there would be language in the JPA that would protect us and our labor groups clearly, and there would clearly be language in the MOU to spell out exactly what our intent is. By approving this transition MOU for Corte Madera and Larkspur today, here's what we're attempting to do. You know, so they would know we're attempting to join the JPA under the following circumstances. If it doesn't happen, there's some language in there that protects obviously our labor group and the city and town.
So is the MOU between each city and the JPA?
It would be between the city and the employee group, and then the town and the employee group.
Okay.
It would not be with the JPA at this point. The JPA is just the mechanism and the structure, the governance.
Got it.
We
Uh,
would- Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to answer your specific question, and since we're recording, we both need to periodically spell out what these acronyms are. So PEPRA is the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. And I think the answer to your question is since PEPRA's been in place, no one's tried to do exactly what we're trying to do. And that's what's created the added wrinkle for the PERS staff. The examples that I was aware of were pre the passage of the Reform Act. And we're asking PERS two things. Let us have a PERS contract for the JPA. And then also let us have a classic benefit for employees who've already been in the pension system. And it's that second question that's causing them heartburn because they have a process they want us to go through, and we were hoping to do it in a different approach.
Right, okay.
Todd, is it possible to have a formation agreement to form the JPA without having the details of the operating in place? Because I've seen some where you have kind of like a formation agreement and then you have an operating agreement. And, you know, we haven't worked out all the details of the operating stuff yet.
Right.
So would you be able to just form it in the absence of all that and then do it later, or we can amend it later? Is that how you figure?
I don't actually think we're that far away from resolving the matter because what we need is some chance to talk to the two labor groups about what this would change in terms of process for the effect on the ground. But I think because we actually have the JPA document roughly drafted at this point and it's modeled after the police authorities JPA, I don't actually think it would take us very long to supplement it to get us to where we need to go. We've done a lot of the work in the background already.
Okay.
Well, I think it sounds like the most expeditious thing for us to do at this point. And I trust that, that Tom Bertrand, that our attorney and others have looked through it well, so I don't have a problem with it.
Do you think this is something that you should take back to your full council, or do you feel comfortable giving direction tonight?
I think
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay tonight. We've been briefing the council regularly, so,
Okay. And of course, each council would have to ultimately agree on the
Yeah.
JPA and any MOU.
so this wouldn't have to come as a resolution or anything, this
Not
change?
not the direction.
Okay.
What's going to change now is I think when we mapped out our process at the management level of how this was all going to work, we sort of envisioned that there'd be a couple of joint council meetings to vet issues, and then there would be sort of the final Corte Madera Town Council meeting where you passed all the documents in one big package, and there'd be the Larkspur City Council meeting, and you'd pass all the documents in one. I think now we're talking about a few trips to each council to get these documents approved in sequence.
Okay. You gentlemen have anything to add?
All I would like to add is that in discussing this option today with the two managers, my eyes kind of lit up because from my perspective, the sooner that we can become kind of psychologically one unit for kind of branding and for identity's sake, we've done a really good job of blending the two cultures between the two departments, and we're working very well together. But the longer this goes on as something that is not complete and in process and taking a long time, the more opportunity for issues arises. And we're at a place, I think, I don't want to speak for the labor guys, but I think we're at a place where everybody is really itching to see some significant progress. And while this wouldn't be a done deal, we'd still have PERS issues to work our way through. To be able to be working under a single JPA organization, I think would give everybody in our organization a lot of confidence and a single identity, which I think is becoming more and more important. So.
Great, thanks.
I'm going to add, Scott, real quick. Is it on or off? It's on. So it's important to realize we've been working on a lot of these issues on the MOU for a year now. It's not like we've been doing it for a couple weeks or a couple months. We've been working really hard on these issues. So it's important for everyone to realize that a lot of this stuff has been talked about, been discussed through both labor groups, and we're in agreement on pretty much everything. So I just want to pass that on.
Great.
And I'd just like to add, as silly as firehouse culture can be, something like a unifying, a patch, a T-shirt, we can hammer out an MOU for a year, and most of our folks are, just okay, whatever. But they're into it, but they need that unifying piece, and that will go a long way. So.
Well, then let's get some T-shirts made. Okay, later on.
Tote bags.
Great. Anybody else have anything to add? No? Okay, thank you very much. So you have your
Okay.
direction on
Thank
that
you.
one?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Great. How about the 2017-18 budget cycle?
Item C again, both councils are in the process of seeing the proposed budgets, and so everything that we're talking about is currently in both proposed budgets for Corte Madera and Larkspur. And just another point, Dan brought this up earlier, but by making this decision now and doing the JPA up front, it'll also give us an opportunity really quickly in this budget cycle to evaluate our operating efficiency sooner. And so that's good, because now when we look at all of our line items, we have some duplication and redundancies, and that'll help us, again, hopefully lower some cost and become more efficient. So thank you for that. I just wanted to remind everyone, item 3D, the city and town websites have dedicated shared fire services pages, and all of these meetings are audio and video recorded moving forward. And with that, I'll go to item E and F, the fire chief update and our labor group update, if you guys have anything.
What I just said to you folks was the main point of what I was planning to say as an update, just that we're ready to move forward. And I just wanted to reassure you too that after working together so well for over a year now, I feel very confident that we have beta tested this at an operational level, and am very pleased with the outcome. I think all of the firefighters are working very well together. It's as if we're one, and we're just not running into any operational issues that are significant. And the improvements that we've gained from doing what we're doing are very noticeable. So unless you have any questions, I'm just pushing forward.
I have one, Scott. When we had Jim Irving's presentation about response times, are you finding that the combining of your working groups together, that the response times are meeting those needs and expectations?
The response times really haven't changed much at all, because we really haven't appreciably changed our physical operation. We've improved it in terms of adding a 24/7 dedicated battalion chief. That has clearly improved our situational awareness and our incident command capabilities, and the ability to manage an incident from the moment the first arriving unit gets there throughout without awkward transitions. So that's been a big plus. One of the things we have done, and I wonder if maybe the gentleman that's here from the public wanted to know about service levels in this general area around Station 14 is alluding to, one of the changes.
Microphone.
One of the changes that we've done operationally is that we have discontinued cross-staffing the ambulance and the fire engine at Station 14 on a daily routine basis. And the reason we did that was that in order to cross-staff that fire engine and ambulance at Station 14, we were spending a bunch of time transitioning equipment. So, for instance, most of the calls were requiring the ambulance. If a fire call came in this general area around Station 14, the staff was spending a bunch of time transitioning their equipment, their protective gear, over to the fire engine. And by the time the fire engine was pulling out of the barn, engine 15 from Larkspur or engine 13 from Bayside was
Already there.
coming right in front of the fire station. So we weren't improving our response capabilities from a firefighting standpoint by cross-staffing the fire engine. One great example of how that has improved things is the fire on Redwood Avenue 8 months ago or so, that was right around the corner from the fire station. The ambulance and the battalion chief rolled out to it, and as soon as the ambulance pulled up, got out, they had their gear on, engine 15 pulled up, and they were on the sidewalk ready to pull a hose line off the engine. And so although the first arriving unit was an ambulance, no time was wasted in getting water on the fire. In fact, it sped up the fire response. Had they moved all their equipment over to the fire engine, engine 15 would have been there before them, and they would have been pulling in late to the incident. So that's one of the operational changes that we've made that we all feel very comfortable has been an improvement. And on the surface, it may look like, well, now we're not rolling a fire engine out of Station 14 routinely, but truly from a firefighting perspective, that is what we found to be the most efficient and capable way of addressing fire calls in Station 14 zone.
Good.
So hopefully that addresses it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that may have addressed his issue.
I don't know, now's a great time, if that is the issue that you wanted to talk about, we can.
Microphone, please.
I want to be out of order here in front of the principal.
That's all right.
Madam Mayor, but yes, my understanding that we no longer have a pumper at our local station here in Christmas Tree Hill, Chapman Park, and Madera Gardens are being served by the station in Larkspur. I don't think the general public, at least being one of those, is aware of that, number one. Number two, we're not aware of the efficiency or effectiveness of that. I know that I'd read that the town was going to experience some $155,000 in savings, so I was curious about what are we really getting in terms of savings and relationship to the service that's going to be provided or currently being provided and also being provided in the future. I know when I came here 20 years ago, we had an issue with the base side of town that didn't really have an operating fire station. In fact, the fire truck sat out in the parking lot with a tarp over it because it wouldn't fit in the station house. And there was a lot of pressure put on staff and the community to build a fire station over there, so we did. And the issue was the 101 separated with Town Center here, Christmas Tree Hill. The other question was when Larkspur did their plan on their capital assets, the question is, what is the condition of the Larkspur station in relation to any major earthquake that we might have and what the impact that would be in the event of a fire? And obviously the issue was also Christmas Tree Hill and the amount of time it takes to get to the top up there, and hopefully we never have a fire at the top of Christmas Tree Hill. So I guess I have a concern that I don't know the public's aware of that change, and I don't know that they're aware of the advantages and disadvantages of that change. And I think that they should be aware of that. That should be discussed. And I think it should be explained to the public as to how you're going to move forward and how that better serves that area, because there's some that still have that issue of we had a freeway, we had a new fire station on the Bay side, we had a fire station operating here, and how is that going to serve us going forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions and comments. And just to reassure you, we do have an operating pumper at Station 14. So if there were an issue with a delayed response from another outlying station or whatever, we do have the capability to transition our equipment into the pumper and respond it. But
Is that staff there?
it's the same staff. It has been a cross-staffed piece of equipment for years and years. So really the only change is instead of having the delay of moving equipment over to the fire engine and then responding only to either be beaten by or tied by the other two stations were now responding immediately in the ambulance with their protective gear and their ability to get started. A lot of things happen before water flows on a fire in the first place. So the crews get out, they do a 360 around the building, they assess what the needs are, they see if any rescues are necessary. All of those things are taking place in a more rapid fashion now by the way we're staffing the equipment. And we can certainly explain that to anybody who is interested, and we'll try to be a little bit more transparent about our operational decisions. But we're doing it that way not to save any money. We're doing it that way to provide the best service possible with the staff that we currently have.
Yeah, can I add in there a little bit, Chief, if I could? Because I've had this conversation with George Warman. I don't know if you've had, but I have. And because George likes to go back to 1945 and work his way forward with operations. And what I'm going to tell you, because my name's on this, I have never been more impressed with the fire department, this isn't about money at this point. This is about service delivery and getting the job done. And I can tell you that I've been really impressed with how our guys and gals in the fire department, one, have really given it thought of how can we do it better? Like, what have we done in the past? Let's not keep doing what we're doing because we've always done it that way. How can we make it better? And this conversation has come up, and there are no changes. I mean, I think if the public knew, honestly, how we did some things operationally in the last 10 years, there'd be a lot more questions for the town of Corte Madera. And I'm going to say that publicly. And so I'm really relieved that I have this group of problem solvers in the house, both on the Corte Madera and Larkspur side, and that we're doing things. And what I think we're going to find is that when we look at analysis like calls for service and operations and how we are setting up, it's a better service, and it's an easy conversation to have, and we'll have it in any forum. And I just, since this is video recorded, I really urge any community member that has a concern, because it's a really good question, Jim. I think and there's a lot more questions like that we can be asking and we should be, to spend some time at the firehouse and watch them and talk about them operationally, especially for those that have lived in the community for decades. I think they're going to be really excited of what they're seeing, both when we talk about paramedic service and how we staff Station 13 on the east side, and how we staff and operate from Station 14, some of the things that we're working on moving forward to streamline and make some efficient savings at the top with how we're set organizationally, but maybe add some firefighters and paramedics where we need them. It's really exciting. And so it's a good conversation, but I felt like compelled to mention it because I've had these conversations with one of my own employees and outside of the fire service. And so, and like I'm saying now, I've urged him and others to go and spend some time with our firefighters, because I think you guys have done a really good job. So.
Can I, and I'd like to also, thank you, Scott, for that. I'd also like to add to some of those concerns about services that, since I've learned in this process and being in this role, we have a really robust mutual aid system in Marin County. And when we had a fire in Larkspur, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, at the very top of Wilson Way, on the top of Madrone Canyon, which is our high hazard fire zone, there were agencies that I think 6 different fire agencies responded. It was a very impressive group of agencies that are helping in a mutual aid setting. So even though we may only be talking about 4 fire stations, when a big event happens, everyone comes in to help, which I think is a real key sense of relief for the community to know that it isn't just Larkspur, it isn't just Corte Madera. When the big deal needs to get in there, it'll be all the assorted agencies around us.
And I just might add that that's all automatic.
Yeah.
We, in the past, that all had to come through request, and by the time it was determined that help was needed, there was a delay. Now this is all, our mutual aid is all automatic. So all we have to do is strike an alarm and they are coming.
Great. Dan, did you have something to add?
I was just to suggest, now that we are video recording, Chief, maybe at a future meeting, Chief Irving, who had been our consultant, had some really nice visuals to, I think, help illustrate the logic of what you're doing, and we could probably modify those to what you're doing operationally, and then do a presentation at the next meeting so we've got a recording that explains the value of having the 2 arrive in the ambulance in their gear.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
Great, that'd be great. Jim, did you have something else?
I've been involved with consolidations before, and also the creation of 3 cities that had. So I appreciate all the details that you're going through, and I have all the confidence in the world in the town of Corte Madera and Larkspur Fire Agency and whatever you end up calling yourselves. But my suggestion is that I try to keep informed what's going on in my community. I have a genuine interest in it, and all I've read is 2 articles in the IJ, and they mentioned the $155,000 in savings and consolidation. You've had your meetings, and I don't think anybody in the community really knows really the work and the effort that's going into this. And I've always felt that when there's change, it's better to tell people up front than at the end. So I encourage you to do that, and as difficult as it might be sometimes to explain to people, but at least make the effort to do that, and encourage you to do that, and appreciate all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the ways we are trying to be more transparent and open about this consolidation process is through video recording these meetings. So I'm just really pleased we're getting that done. And as was mentioned earlier, there are spots on both towns' websites for the fire consolidation, and links to the videos will be on there, as well as presumably agendas and other materials. Okay, unless there's anybody else who'd like to speak to this item, shall we move on to consolidation discussion items?
I think we have labor group.
Oh, I'm sorry, labor group update. Thank you.
As Chief's alluded to, we've been working together for over a year. I'm a Corte Madera employee. I've been working in Larkspur for over a year. It's a great change. I love working with new people. We are consolidated at our level, so it's working. As far as the MOU stuff, we've brought together an MOU. We've actually presented it to our union reps, and so that they can go through the legalese. And so that's where we are right now. It looks like we're going to move forward. So.
Great. Tom, you have anything to add?
That's good.
Okay. Thank you. Anything you gentlemen wanted to add? Anybody from the public? Council members? All right, now we can move on to consolidation discussion items. Agenda item number 4. Let's start with fire stations.
Thank you. So, as you know, each agency brings to the JPA 2 fire station facilities. Ownership, financing, maintenance, and operational use should be discussed and identified. The management committee has been talking about following a similar model to that of a CMPA of how we handle the San Anselmo station. And so basically San Anselmo leases the station for $1. They're basically responsible for electrical and plumbing and all things outside the building. So ownership would be retained by the city and towns, the city and town. And then basically the janitorial service and things like that, maintenance inside the building, the JPA would theoretically handle that in the agreement. So it would be in our operating budget.
Yes.
May I ask a question? I just want to understand, Todd, where we're going with this. On the next couple pages of our draft, sorry about that. Just want to understand sort of the sequence that we're going here. We have a series of bullet points here, fire stations through name of agency, and then a couple pages where you have topic headings and then discussion points, and then a sort of a blank area where a recommendation is. What is the plan? Is these are sort of issue spotting, and then you're going to make a comment, and then you're expecting direction from the committee here, or what sort is the plan here?
Yes, thank you. So the bullet points before you under item 4, the consolidation discussion items, like you said, behind it, there are those headings of the discussion, the item, and then the recommendation would be the recommendation of this ad hoc committee. And what we're going to do is work through each of the consolidation points and issues, and as we problem solve them and get direction as a recommendation from the ad hoc committee, we're going to add that this is a working document moving forward. And what we'd like to do is complete this working document at some point and to be able to take it back to our respective councils for approval ultimately of our JPA.
And the plan is to try to do a sort of a draft tonight, or what's the goal for tonight?
Our goal for tonight, if we can, and we made a major step, the CalPERS is a huge
Right.
direction for us, but would also be helpful for us as we start to work towards a JPA up front potentially. There's some bullet points here with the consolidation discussion items that would be really helpful for that JPA document up front. And so we're hoping for each one of these items for you to hear our recommendation and to either approve it or give it further direction.
Got
And
it.
if we can't come to a decision tonight, that's okay too. Then it's just give us direction and we'll come back to you. So these aren't end-all be-alls, like we have to accomplish all of these. But one of them that would be really helpful is the last one, the name of the agency. And so again, these are recommendations by the ad hoc committee, but I think it'll go a long way with the councils as we move forward.
I think
Just to add, ultimately, we would like you to have one document that you as an ad hoc committee could agree should go to your respective councils that summarizes all the issues and recommendations. We're going to try to signpost this evening some of these issues, like the name of the agency. We actually would like to get some direction from you this evening, only because we're finding to keep moving our good progress forward. There are a few of these where some direction tonight would be helpful. We know that as much as possible, you both would like to go back and report to your respective councils before you make any commitments. So we're trying to minimize how often we ask this group to specifically make a decision. And so what we'd like to do mostly is take feedback tonight on the recommendations so we can come back and say, here's kind of what we captured. But as Todd's alluded to, there are one or two things tonight where we may press you to give us a green light, like the CalPERS things, just so we know we can pick up the phone in the morning and say, this is the direction we're going in.
And to your point too, we will add a summary of this document, because this is a working document that goes on our website, and so it'll be a summary of what we're asking you to do and what we're talking about, and then they can see the recommendations as we go with the ad hoc committee. So I think it'll be
Thank you.
good public conversation. And with that, basically, the fire stations, we each have two. We're going to both keep our retained ownership of both stations at this point. They stay with Corte Madera and Larkspur, but again, the maintenance cost, the day-to-day operational cost, we would attempt to, this fiscal year, move them into the JPA if we can. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What about capital type maintenance, like major maintenance?
So it'd be similar to that of the lease agreement that we have with San Anselmo. That would be the responsibility of the town and city. And again, we will take that model and bring that back to you so you can see that. But that is our intent, to handle all major issues with the building would be the responsibility of the town or city. We're talking about basic janitorial services, basic maintenance, desks, computers, things like that, day-to-day items.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but in the joint Corte Madera Larkspur council meeting that we had last year, there were several questions brought up about Station 15 and its maybe obsolescence. Is that part of what comes up in here now, or is that really further down the road?
Yeah, I think the genesis of that and those concepts, for folks who watch this who aren't familiar with our numbering, this is the downtown Larkspur station. And I think the genesis of that conversation is that, I want to say 5-6 years ago, the two fire chiefs at the time, Chief Sprain and Chief Sennett, were talking about ways to be more cooperative. And one of the discussions that Chief Sennett had put on the table is, well, maybe Station 15 isn't as necessary from a fire prevention standpoint, and it could either serve as an ambulance bay or perhaps someday it doesn't need to be there. And I think a few folks kind of heard that and got excited about it for a variety of reasons. Today we have right now we want to put all 4 stations in fully operational as they are. If that someday is a reality, fine, it's a reality someday, but it's not something that we've asked the staff in any way to contemplate at this time.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Scott? No? Nope. Okay. Anybody from the public care to comment? All right. So they are asking for direction. Are we okay with that? I think it seems to be modeled on what was
It's
done
worked.
at Central Marin
Yeah.
Police Authority when Twin Cities Police merged with San Anselmo Police. And I think that has worked out very well. Larry?
No, I'm fine with that. I know that agreement.
Okay.
I think
Alright.
it sounds fine.
Okay.
$1 a rent, pretty good around the Bay Area. Man,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got it. Existing capital assets.
Okay, the next one, again, Corte Madera and Larkspur will bring to the expanded JPA fire services related to capital assets in the form of, and we already discussed fire stations, but fire vehicles and equipment. And we had Chief Shirts and his staff put together a basic side-by-side comparison of our current capital inventory with our fire trucks and some of our high-priced apparatus. As you can see in looking at this, both sides have recently replaced major inventory within the fire service. To date, Corte Madera's expended approximately $3.1 million and actually has $3.1 million in replacement cost, and Larkspur has 3.1 as well. The difference between the two is one of the fire trucks that Larkspur purchased is being leased, and so that would be the next item, would be that would continue to be the responsibility of Larkspur, the lease payments, because again, Larkspur is getting credit on the capital assets, with that being part of the inventory of the new JPA. And with that, go ahead, jump in there if you want.
Well, I think to clarify, we were pleasantly surprised that the two agencies' ledgers of assets that we're bringing are comparable in value and generally comparable in age. I think there's a note, too, that we were going to purchase a pickup truck, which I think the chief ordered today, or he's planning on ordering this week, which is indicated there, yeah. So in this case, we think it would make a lot of sense to move the equipment into the Joint Powers Authority and have the authority own its vehicles and own all the other major capital assets, because the authority really is the body that should become responsible for maintaining all of this equipment. The guys use it. They're the ones that'll know when it needs to be fixed. They should be, scheduling the maintenance of it. The outstanding issue is the fact that Larkspur has a lease. So what we would probably have to do, first get clarification from attorneys about transferring a lease into the authority, but we'd then have to, for the life of that lease, charge the entire amount to Larkspur so that the equity is maintained in terms of the initial contribution of assets. And then what the authority chooses to do going forward for its equipment replacement schedule is something we'll have to build into a joint budget together. But I think making that one provision that we need to account for Larkspur's obligation on the lease, we have a surprisingly balanced sheet in front of us.
How long is that lease?
It's a 7-year lease, and we've paid 1 year. So.
And the equipment isn't arriving until sometime this fall?
It's a wonderful
hopefully?
thing about fire truck, whether you purchase it or lease it, you
still
don't
pay
see it
on it.
for a while. So when does it arrive, Chief? In about a month.
Okay.
So.
What color? The other thing is some of the longer-term savings, if we are able to form our JPA, is with this, because there are some redundancies now, like when we have to purchase a fire truck, we can't only share it, but we might not need it
Right.
because we have another one. So there could be some future cost savings as well.
So going to our signposting effort here, I think what we're asking for here is some general indication that you'd be comfortable with us finishing the work to have all of the equipment assets be owned by the JPA. That's the direction we'd like to go to, noting that we need to resolve the legalities of Larkspur continuing to pay the lease, but I think we'd like to see the lease end up in the JPA's name for a variety of liability reasons, particularly because all of our insurance that replaces damaged vehicles will be in the JPA's name. So the guys aren't going to damage the fire truck, but just in case something happened, it would be good to have the insurance correctly tied to it. So,
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that everything ought to be, part of the JPA. But I want to go back just 1 minute. By that I mean the vehicles, the equipment, the station furnishings, the office equipment, and all other fire service-related capital assets. I want to go back to the stations for a minute. Diane, that was or was it? Somebody asked a smart question about that. Was that you, Diane, about?
Well, hopefully.
So let's go back to the fire station for 1 minute. That the obligation to maintain each of the stations, that would be part of the JPA. But the station itself would continue to be owned separately by each town. And then a major capital improvement is something that each town separately would be obliged to, or it's part of the JPA. So, for example, if there needs to remodel something, is that a JPA thing or is that a town thing?
So the way the San Anselmo lease is generally structured is that internal remodeling is the police authority's responsibility, because they've essentially become a tenant. They'd be making a tenant improvement. When you're only charging $1 rent, you don't have to squabble about rent credits on tenant improvements. So that's how that agreement's structured. Anything that has to do with the physical structure or the utilities supplied and the infrastructure for utilities is San Anselmo's responsibility. And so we would contemplate something similar here, so that the authority, if the guys decide they want to change the bedroom, that should come out of the authority's equipment fund. But if they say there's a hole in the wall, that should be whichever town's responsibility is to fix the hole in the wall.
So a roof or adding on a new room, that's something that would be part of the JPA or part of the town's responsibility?
Now, that would be an interesting one. We didn't contemplate that in the San Anselmo lease, so that's something we'd need to talk about. If we were going to make one of the facilities bigger, whose responsibility is that? And that's probably an outstanding question we'll need to give some thought to.
I mean, just as a concept, I'm in favor of making everything as much as possible a JPA thing.
So there is a big reason not to do that, though, that I need to make sure everyone's aware of, and that's that both agencies have borrowed against these assets, and so they can't readily be.
No, but to finish that thought, but I
Sorry.
don't think that we ought to sell or give away any, real property in that way. In other
Right.
words, maintain the ownership of the property, but improvements are something that should properly, I think, be a part of the JPA. That's my own thought of it.
Well, but what about something like a plumbing repair or, redoing a retaining wall or something like that?
I think that those are very difficult questions.
I think those are intrinsic to the building itself, and it has to do with, it's probably directly related to the age and how well it's been maintained up until now, and those are huge unknowns.
But you think those are properly part of a JPA or properly part of a town?
I think those are properly part of the town. However, if operationally it becomes obvious that a particular facility needs a major overhaul or an addition, I think that is probably JPA because it's directly related to operation of that facility.
Yeah.
But if you have to put in a new sewer lateral, I think that should be the town or the city.
See, this has raised some concerns for me now that you've brought that up, and that I know the status because we've had a discussion in our facility discussion of our two stations, what their issues are and their age and things like that, because we've discussed that. I don't really know anything about the status of the physical condition of the two stations in Corte Madera. Can we get more information about that? I mean, do you feel confident as the manager that we're looking at sort of similar, potentially similar issues between those two buildings so that, because I know we've got one really old one and.
Well, I don't think anybody, just knowing the history of the four buildings, it's pretty likely the one in the most need of TLC is the downtown Larkspur station. I think if you write a lease agreement clearly, and I'm comfortable we can do this, that the conditions do become the obligations of their respective communities to deal with. If there really are true problems with the facility itself, then the community that's committed that building will be there for the JPA needs to repair that building. And I say that knowing the downtown building's probably the one that
Yeah.
would be the first one to get flagged as having issues. But I think you've raised a very good point about if operationally we decide one of the structures needs to be changed because we want to do the operations differently, I think that then the new fire council will have to have a discussion about whose responsibility that is and who owns it and how it gets paid for, and we'd probably have to go through a process at that time to sort it out. And it's a great point because, as we all know, the regulations on fire change constantly, and they may suddenly get mandated to have some type of equipment that they don't have today and that we don't necessarily have the capacity to house in any of the facilities. I can't imagine today what that is, but I just, those things happen, so we will need to at least have an acknowledgement there needs to be a process and maybe define roughly what that looks like.
Oh, Larry?
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up earlier, but I think it's good to reiterate because when we decided we were going to keep the assets associated with each of the respective cities, they are encumbered.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
You know, we can't transfer that to the JPA unless we find another way to secure the debt with another asset, both of us respectively.
So it's not really an option. And has the Central Rhone Police Authority's agreement with San Anselmo worked out all right? And is there a process in there for figuring out these sorts of problems?
There is, and in fact, it's worked both ways. There was some San Anselmo activity that damaged the station that San Anselmo took care of, and then there was some Central Maine Police activity that damaged the.
Caught it on fire.
Well, I wasn't gonna say what it was.
No way.
Maybe an old computer caught on fire. I don't know, but and so the lease was very clear, and we dealt with it. Admittedly, the space in San Anselmo is probably even more than the authority truly needs operationally. So this idea that we'd ever have to grow out there hasn't been something that we contemplated. So I don't think the lease ever really needed to even address the idea of expanding the facility.
Okay, I mean, I'm good. I'm in complete agreement.
Okay. I'm glad we had that, you brought those things up, though. That helped me think through some ideas.
Chief Shorts, do you have anything to add?
It sounds like there's clarity now. I was just going to offer, just as a way of thinking about it, as a general rule of thumb, if we look at it as essentially a tenant-landlord arrangement, those are the kind, if the station needs a new roof because the roof is worn out, that would typically be the landlord's responsibility. If it needs a coat of paint because people have been tough on the walls, then the tenant would put the new coat of paint up. I mean, those types of situations might help clarify who's responsible for what as a general rule of thumb. But as Dan said, it's probably all spelled out pretty well in the lease agreement that we'll model it after for Central Marin.
Okay. Anything to add, gentlemen? Anybody else have anything to say?
And we'll bring that lease agreement
Okay.
at the next meeting.
Great. All right, so you're clear on
Yes,
on
thank
that?
you.
Thank you. So,
Mirror obligations?
well, so we covered the equipment obligations outstanding adequately with that also, right?
Looks like that's just the one fire engine.
It's just,
Right.
Yeah.
okay. Mirror obligations.
As you know, both the town of Corte Madera and the city of Larkspur are currently paying back bond debt payments to Mira until 2021, and so those would again remain. We would itemize those out between Corte Madera and Larkspur, and so it'll follow the model of Central Marin Police Authority, and then we also have. I guess we don't have any future. Well, there'll be a conversation down the road with this, but currently we're going to basically just keep the two obligations separate. We'll itemize them out within the JPA and pay for them through the JPA, but they'll be itemized out, similar to what we do with Central Marin Police Authority.
What are those approximately, or
$65,000
Per year?
We're very similar, yeah, yes.
I think ours might be. It's about that. Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more.
I think the one complication, and it's solvable, is in the new Mira for the next round, if we were to add radios, I think those may end up actually in the JPA as the JPA's responsibility, because the way they set up the new system, if you expand your use of the system, then the agency picks up a greater share of that new expanded amount. So, but those are easily solved. So.
Okay.
Are any of our respective staffs using Mira for anything other than public safety?
Well, you need to think of your public works department as first responders, and they also have Mira equipment in public works for that purpose. So, but that obligation is separate. So,
Okay.
So we will have 3 Mira agreements essentially. One for the JPA and one for the town and one for the city for their public works.
Yeah, Public Works is
Staff?
separate, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Scott, do you have anything to add? Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Do you need any recommendation on that one, or
No.
you're good to go? All right, reserves.
Do you want to jump in? I mean, I guess this is going to be a work in progress. We're continuing to talk about the reserves. At this time, I don't know that we need. You want to ask for direction at this time?
No, I don't think we need direction. Maybe just share where we are both conscious of what our own budgets are wrestling with. We're both conscious of what we're trying to do over at the police authority, and for the benefit of those of you who don't sit on the police authority's board, we've done some things there to clear up some deficits, and we've done that with the police authority, but it's wiped out most of the reserves, so now we have to go through a process to build them back up. And so I imagine we will have to do something similar here, because neither of our budgets is really capable on day one of funding a 5% operational reserve for this agency. I think we'll have to have a build-up period. And so during the build-up period, both the town and the city's general fund reserves have to sort of act as the backstop if something unfortunate were to happen. And I think you can anticipate we'll propose that. I think the only question we need to sit down and figure out is what those our recommendations are for operational reserve, an equipment fund reserve, that sort of thing. And we'll need to talk to the chief about what he sees as the equipment cycle, because that'll be an important component of those recommendations. And now that we have a full inventory, we know the general lifespan of these things, we can start to do that.
Maybe this is a better question for the chief. Does the cyclical nature of fire, especially during the summers where you have people going out for mutual aid calls, does that change your cash flow model? Because with police, it's not as dramatic, and they get paid, on a monthly basis by the respective city and town. So it's not like we need to have a cash reserve of 8 months like we do for, the property tax payments.
Right. Well, it does hit us in a cyclical nature like that, and unfortunately, the increased overtime costs that are accrued during wildland season tend to start to hit us early in our budget cycle. Of course, all of that is reimbursed eventually, but it hasn't proven to be a cash flow issue for either agency that I'm aware of so far. And my understanding is that the police actually have a more difficult issue with that, because they make annual purchases early in the year and run into that more so than we do. We basically space out our purchasing throughout the year. It's just the overtime costs that are a little bit spiked during the late summer.
Yeah, but now you won't have the city and town's cash reserve.
So if I can jump in, Larry. So the police, as the chief alluded to, we're actually switching to quarterly funding of the police to try to reduce the times when the Larkspur treasury is exposed, because Larkspur acts as the treasury for the police. Corte Madera is going to be the treasury for the fire operation. So to limit Corte Madera's exposure on cash flow, we probably should look at quarterly funding of their operations with an upfront payment at the beginning of the fiscal year, which that way there would be sufficient funds on hand to handle any lean time for the fire.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I do. It's your intention to put a percent or a monthly or something in the JPA that will identify at least a goal for reserves?
Yeah, so it really should be a policy adopted by the fire council once the fire council is formed. So it'd be one of the first actions that should happen. The new fire council should adopt an official budget, and as part of that action, there should be a percentage. But I think we should probably all agree ahead of time what that's going to look like.
So you may all have lots of experience with the police station on this, but I sit on at least one Joint Powers Authority board where this is a very animated discussion that we have about how much ought to be put aside and at what timing. And I don't know if it derails the process to try to sort that out beforehand or whether it's better to do it after the fact, but just to spot an issue for you, this can be a hot button issue, that's all.
I think one thing though to keep in mind is a difference than some of the other joint powers authorities that you probably sit on is that a lot of the joint powers authorities that serve Marin County are fully dependent on drawing in those revenues off of the member agencies and then living off of them for the year. But the way we've set up the police authority and the way we'll set up the fire authority is we guarantee as member agencies that if there's a time of distress, we both have to equally come to the table and keep the agency out of distress. And I think that's unique to some of those arrangements, and why, although I think we could have some debate about what that number ought to be, I don't know that it'll be quite as contentious as a few of the broader JPAs are dealing with.
All right, thank you.
Anything?
Okay, no,
Chief, you're good? Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Insurance.
Next, well, the good news is, last week, the Bay Cities Risk Pool, the board voted us, was it unanimous?
It was unanimous.
So we're in.
Yay, Corte Madera.
We're at
Corte
Madera's
Madera
in
is
the Bay
now a
Cities Risk
member on July 1st. Yep.
So one of the questions now before us, and we've been discussing it with the board, is to potentially submit an application on behalf of our potential JPA before the Bay Cities Risk Pool to also add them as coverage. So that again is probably a 3 to 6 month process. And so if we have direction from you tonight, we would like to start that process.
Now, is that an application that you two can put in anticipation of the JPA being finalized, and then have that then endorsed by the new board, fire board?
Right, and so one of their analysis would then be, what do we, because we've already funded our fire departments, and so they would do an analysis and pull, basically, we'd be credited for this year financially. Go ahead.
So we have enough information at this point to provide to the risk pool and say, this is what the new agency generally would look like. And then what the risk pool will do is they'll spend a couple of months analyzing the risks associated with our operation, so that they then can provide an analysis back to us that we can use to present to the fire council to say we would like to apply for membership in this body. The sooner we start that dialogue with the risk pool, the better, just because it does take them a few months to go through a process to analyze the risk. The nice thing here is we're starting from scratch. We're not bringing a bunch of liabilities into the situation from the risk pool standpoint. So that's a real positive. The other unique thing is because the town and the city already belong to the risk pool, it will expedite the process, much the way when San Anselmo joined Central Marin, we had no issues bringing the new Central Marin into the risk pool because the existing Twin Cities was in the risk pool and San Anselmo was in the same risk pool. Here again, we'll have partners that are already in. So from a lot of respects, this is bookkeeping, but it still has to happen. But I think we'd like to know that you're generally comfortable with us pursuing it, because we don't want to put the folks at the risk pool through a lot of work if it's not somewhere you're generally interested. For the benefit of the public, what we're talking about is that Larkspur and now Corte Madera and Central Marin Police belong to a body that includes, are you the 20th member now? Or the 19th member? 20th member. So we have 20 agencies in the Bay Area who together put money away into investment accounts that are used to pay off claims against the city. And we do this because by collectively building up these funds, we avoid paying insurance premiums on the vast majority of our claims, because a lot of our claims are pretty modest. And if we had to pay insurance on that, we'd actually be spending quite a bit more in insurance than we save collectively by doing the joint payment of claims. We then, as a pool, as a 20-member pool with a large body of assets, are able to purchase insurance for our higher level risk as a collective. And so we get much better rates that way. So what we're essentially proposing is that once the Joint Powers Authority is formed, it would be its own legal entity with its own insurance risk, and it would be useful to enter into some discussion. And like you said, the Police Authority is currently a member of the risk pool, and it's worked quite well for that organization. I think one of the other benefits that I strongly would advocate looking at this is the risk pool purchases, if you choose to do it, which all of our entities do, workers' compensation services from a third-party administrator, and we just don't have the depth of staff to do workers' compensation administration at the way it needs to be done, and it's really great to be able to pick up the phone and talk to people who live and breathe that, because you want to make sure that employees are treated correctly, the process is followed correctly, and that the agency's protected. And so, if nothing else, I'd probably say that'd be my number one advocacy for why we should do it.
Dan, could you elaborate on the last sentence? Both agencies have outstanding liability claims and workers' compensation claims. So with these outstanding claims, will those remain the responsibility of the individual city and town, or?
Yeah, and that's actually another benefit of the fact that we'll both be in the risk pool at the time of application for the fire authority, because yes, so that whenever someone joins the risk pool, they start at zero and they don't bring any liabilities in. Any liabilities they already have, they have to take care of themselves outside of. But interestingly enough, all of Larkspur's liabilities related to what the risk pool covers are all already in the pool.
Oh.
Corte Madera will have some period that'll be in the pool, and then they'll have the period that they've been covering through outside insurance that's all already been documented and taken care of. So that's not really an issue
Okay.
from the risk pool standpoint.
Do we have a lot of several employees that are out on workers' compensation now?
No, and in fact, Corte Madera was one of the, we use what's called the X-mod factor. Corte Madera had one of the better ratings of an applicant in quite a while.
Good,
So-
okay. So we're not looking at an inequity there and a number of liabilities outstanding before we join together. So
No.
that's
No.
good.
So is that X
Like healthy
mod?
employees.
Yeah. That's, those of us who do too much risk and insurance, that's our lingo for high X-mod bad, low X-mod good.
Great. Anything else? Nope. All right. Chief Shirts, nothing? Okay. Moving on, funding formula.
Okay, currently within our, both of our fiscal year 17-18 budgets, we've taken this, these assumptions within this paragraph, and basically, the fire JPA calls for each of the two agencies to share all staffing at on a 50-50 basis. And all revenue is currently remaining as is. So our revenue, we both have unique revenue streams, and so that revenue stays specific to Corte Madera and to Larkspur. And so that's how we're running now operationally, and how we recommend we move forward with any JPA. And again, we continue to work. Our next step, where we really have to work hard on, and we are, is how we handle paramedic services and the taxing mechanism in 2019. Currently, we have our own taxing mechanism, and we'll have to continue to discuss that. But again, that tax wouldn't affect Larkspur in any way. Our two options would we contract through the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, and then we form a contract and they pay us back via contract. The revenue stream would be very similar, or do we continue as is? And so we're continuing to work with Bob Ravazio, who is our representative on the RVPA, Jason Weber, who is the, what would we call Jason? The executive officer, and obviously Chief Shirts and Dan, and moving forward, we're working on our solution. So moving forward, our recommendation would be to handle all personnel costs on a 50-50 basis. So, do you have any?
Yeah, there are some first-year reconciliations that we've talked about in the past that would need to occur, but that would be just first year one time as we sort of true up for during this period of transition. Each of the agencies has borne different costs. You'll recall Corte Madera initially it bore a pretty high cost because you were providing a lot more rank and file overtime. Larkspur's kind of caught up on that by hiring more and paying for a little more of the administrative costs, but there'll need to be a true up, and in the first year, however that trues up, we'll account for it.
And again, on a monthly basis, we do meet with our finance directors, talk, the managers speak, and as well as the chief. And so we're monitoring every pay period, every month, and so we can follow the money, and we'll figure that out at the end of the year. But it's been very close.
Yeah. Sloan?
Yeah, thank you. May I ask the chief a question?
Of course.
So, I mean, it sounds roughly fair to me. I like that concept of 50-50. It just sounds equitable to me. But, Chief, just based on your, professional experience here, and you look at what topography and commercial versus, and then our population and I don't know, area and so forth. The two towns are roughly comparable in terms of the drain when you put all in.
I really think 50/50 is
Pretty fair.
very fair, very reasonable, easy to defend, and simplifies everything. I mean, if we start getting into formulas based on call volume and population type and structures, commercial districts, we'd end up probably putting in a tremendous amount of work to come out around 50/50.
Thank you.
That's my guess.
Can you, just my ignorance on this, can you clarify something for me? It used to be, if I remember right, if a Larkspur resident dials 911 and a Corte Madera truck or an ambulance shows up, they get billed, the Larkspur resident does, for the Corte Madera services of the paramedic fire.
So that's not happening.
Okay.
RVPA handles all of the billing liability for any RVPA resident if they are transported by a Corte Madera unit. So it's really, if they do receive a bill, it was an error and they needed to forward it to the RVPA, who will take care of it.
Okay. That was a while ago, so.
Yeah, things have changed over the years, but right now it's working pretty smoothly.
Okay.
And that was specific to ambulance service, right?
Yeah.
Right, of course,
Yeah.
yeah. Just for ambulance service.
Larry, anything? Anything else?
Great, I
We're
like
good
that
with
funding
50/50?
formula. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And presumably, down the road, the fire council could
yeah.
revisit this if it turns out that conditions have changed.
And we'll talk about
appreciably.
this again. This will be an annual conversation. You know, we're gonna, with a lot of
Great.
analysis, and we'll spell it out.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you. Okay.
Name of agency.
Last one. So I've always said if we're talking about the
last
name of
one?
the agency, we won. But unfortunately, we're going to do it up front because we need to form the JPA. But what has really come up is our labor group, our firefighters, this is their number one really concern and issue. The name of the agency is important to them. And so we put it on the agenda tonight. We want to let them speak to it and share with you why it's important to them. I think they want a sense of identity, and I think they also have a name in mind.
Yep.
And so with that, I'll turn it
There's a
over to
lot
them.
of head nodding over there.
Let's hear it. I'm fascinated.
I know.
This is very exciting.
Okay, Nick, the big reveal.
Big reveal. You may have heard this somewhere before. We, as the labor group, are united behind the name Central Marin Fire. And we understand that it may be an authority, and it's identified, I think, in the agenda versus a department. Department is very traditional for the fire department. And I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, the fire service is 100 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. So,
Sounds like nurses to
Yeah.
me.
so we kind of drive this name collectively with administration and the labor group through our working committee. We think it really identifies who we are, and where we want to go. So it also aligns us with the Central Marin Police Authority. So we really like the name. We're proud of the name, and it's the name that we want on our back every day. So,
So Central Marin Fire,
Department?
with department or without?
I think there's a legal part of that, and I think the chief may be able to explain that part of it.
Okay.
Sure. It appears from talking to all the labor group that there's a strong preference for the term department, but because of the instrument that we're planning to use, the JPA is often referred to as an authority, and many agencies you're probably familiar with do keep the term authority in their name, but there are examples also throughout the state where just through the JPA document itself, they have acknowledged on page 1 or page 2 that although this is a joint powers authority, the department will be referred to, or the agency will be referred to as a department for henceforth. So I did actually printed out a copy of the Ross Valley Fire Department's JPA because they addressed it in item 1.2, and it just says the entity operated by the authority under the name Ross Valley Fire Service, which is what it originally was called, shall henceforth be referred to as the Ross Valley Fire Department. From and after the effective date, the authority shall use reasonable efforts to utilize and operate under the name Ross Valley Fire Department in official communications and transactions, and to discontinue the use of the name Ross Valley Fire Service. So it can be done. It's just it's a preference by the folks that are wearing the patch. They'll still show up for work if we have to call it the Central Marin Fire Authority, but they prefer department.
I think that's terrific.
you brought all
And I
of those.
think using the term department will be easier when you're looking at the acronym to differentiate it from CMPA. So I think that's great. Tom, did you have anything to add?
Sure. So we have City of Larkspur, Town of Corte Madera. We're trying to find something in between that would work for both. That doesn't show preference to one or the other. I know everyone has feelings about that, and I think this is a really good way to go. If down the road something happened where we had other agencies that might want to join in or work together as we have consolidations going all over, saving costs or whatever, it gives us that opportunity also. So I think it's very appropriate. As Nick stated, we have 100% buy-in from every member of both departments. So.
Great.
Yes, I
Managers,
guess
Sounds
so.
good to me.
Yep.
managers have anything to add? Okay.
Guess you could,
Larry?
just make Tom just has to make it happen, right? It's kind of like a DBA.
I only wanted to add, although Todd's right, primary issues, we want to resolve this as a group. We actually do kind of need to know that you're okay with the name, because we have to start ordering it on stuff. It turns out if you get something painted on a truck and then you change your mind, it's kind of expensive. So, so that's another reason to get some confirmation tonight you're comfortable with the name.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Good.
Good with you. Now, I hate to throw this out there, but I think we need to discuss whether or not this is something we need to take back to our council. I am happy just simply having our town manager perhaps make a statement about this in his town manager report, and asking any of the council members to contact him if they have any concerns about that. And if you don't hear anything, I think we're good to go. Obviously, it's not agendized for our council meeting tomorrow night.
Well, I have
So-
fire service update, so I can give it.
Okay. But, I mean, we can't vote on it, is my point, because it's not agendized. What do you think? Because this is kind of a big deal.
I don't think it's as big of a deal as you think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've only had one constituent bring it up.
And even then, most people refer to the Central Marin Police Authority as the Central Marin Police Department. Your
Yeah.
average person views fire and police as a department.
Yeah,
That's why they're always asking what the A is, too.
got it. I don't anticipate any council members are going to be concerned. I just think it is a big thing, and I personally think it would be a good idea to run it by our council.
We actually have a similar
Yeah.
listing on our agenda for Wednesday night, so we can follow the same script.
Yeah. And I think that 100% of our professionals agree that this is the name rings true for me, that that's what should be. It's not my opinion, it's theirs that matters in this, in my opinion.
Well, it's just going to be a legal thing, and our only attorney's not there Wednesday.
Okay. Sloan?
I mean, to me, the thing is, are we protecting our citizens? Are our professionals satisfied? How much does it cost? I mean, I'm good with the name.
Good. Okay.
I want to see the patch,
So
though.
by Thursday, can we start ordering the T-shirts and putting names on stickers and stuff?
They've already been ordered. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I did want to just reassure you also that the tradition of having the name of the community that the fire engine serves locally on the fire engine is going to continue, despite the fact that we may be called the Central Marin Fire Department. The fire engine
It's
at
still
Station
Central
14 and at Station 13 will say Corte Madera on it, and likewise with Larkspur and Greenbrae. So, in addition to the logo emblem on the door, there will also be some badging that identifies its local community.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what Ross Valley does, so looks fine.
okay, great. All righty. So So that pretty much takes care of all of the consolidation discussion items. We have a list of 5 items under future agenda items. Do we just simply want to hold on to those for next time? Is there any overview or anything you want to say about any of them tonight?
They are just tied to, again, the big financial conversations, both short-term and long-term, or our unfunded liabilities and how we handle those, kind of like we have on some of the other talking points and items tonight. But we still have some more work to do before we come back before you with that.
Okay.
So, thank
For
you.
the benefit of the folks at home, I'm just going to read them real quick. Number 1, CalPERS unfunded liabilities. Number 2, compensated absence accruals, such as sick leave, vacation, and comp time. Number 3, other post-employment benefits, with the acronym OPEB. Number 4, organization chart and governance. And number 5, joint powers authority agreement. If there's nothing else anybody would like to add, great meeting, really glad to hear the updates.
Can we just kind of reiterate what the timeline is now, just, or is it still a moving target? At least we,
I think you just moved the actual formation of the
Well,
JPA up quite a bit.
Good.
So we could probably report out within a week, maybe by memo, what we think the timeline will be.
Okay.
We need to make a few phone calls to check in, but I think if we're going to go down this path, once we've sat down with all of the fire guys and talked it through, I think we'd have a defined path of at least forming the JPA in the next, I don't know, coming out of the summer. I don't want to get myself too much on the spot because I'm always surprised how many bureaucratic hoops pop up. But I'm starting to think the JPA is going to be formed relatively soon.
Yes.
Don't
and then
jinx
you'll
it.
want, we'll want to have another one of
Does
these
count as
maybe
wood?
at the end, September-ish?
We should talk about that. We should pick another date tonight. But to that point too, I just want to also share that we've scheduled, because we knew we were going to be positive leaving this meeting, an all-dayer on the 19th with the labor group. And so we're going to really work hard
Good.
with the labor group to try to get to an agreement with our MOU, because that'll be critical as well with moving forward with CalPERS. And we should put a date on the board, July, August?
I think we should try to meet in July, yeah, because I think by then
Okay.
we'll have some of these items to return to you with for more feedback, and then I think some of the future agenda items will start to crystallize.
Great.
Do Monday nights work for the group? I mean, the 10th, 17th, 24th?
All of them right now for me.
Of July?
Yeah,
Not the first 2 for me, sorry.
Okay, the
I need a
17th and the
calendar.
24th.
okay, so the first Monday in July is the 3rd.
Which is a holiday.
Second one is the 10th. So since Sloan can't make that, we're talking about the 17th or the 24th of July.
I meant either the only one of those, look, I'm not.
The 24th?
The only one of those I could make is the 24th, sorry.
Same with me, I
Oh.
can do the 24th.
Oh. That's
24th?
lucky.
I'm good.
Yeah, I might not.
24th
it
works for
is.
me.
Yep.
I'm not sure.
Looks like it's the
Might
24th.
have to solo with that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
drive
it's the only one that works for me.
That's good for me, thank you.
Okay.
I'm just not sure, but you might have to.
Okay, so hold on. Are we having a?
Todd has just said that if he has to fly solo, he will, so we will.
All right, well, we could make it the 31st.
I'm gonna have to check, but I think I will work it out. So I'll try to make the 24th work. I'm trying to.
But either way, we'll make sure that his input is involved in
Yeah.
that
Okay.
agreement. And
I'm very comfortable deferring to Todd. So we're in lockstep at this point. So, and he talks better than me. So.
not as succinctly. Clearly, I'm working on it.
And do we want to confer about what we're going to report out at our respective council meetings, or just leave that to the managers? Do you guys have a preference?
Trying to remember when I'm going to
I'm sorry, what was
Do you have a preference for what we jointly report out on? What topics we make sure we both cover?
Well, it sounds like both agendas include
They do.
the managers talking about this. So I say, let's let them coordinate.
Okay. Is that all right?
Is that all right with you guys?
So because I think consistent messaging is very important, since we are a team.
Same time on the 24th?
I guess
That
so.
sounds good.
6:30?
Yeah, that works.
All right. Monday, July 24th, 6:30.
Do we want to move that meeting
This is fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, Larkspur residents don't have that far to travel if they wanted to come.
Well, let's move it over there.
You want to do it in Larkspur?
Sure. We could show you our glorious city hall.
Can we take a tour of the fire station, since it's right next door?
Sure.
I don't know, you're gonna,
Thank you.
All right. That's it. Thank you all for coming. Meeting is adjourned.